from a non-God believer, really because I don't think that any religion that you have to access through a person or a building and a structure and a format is a good thing, because it leads to power and control over those people that want to access that God. Also, I'm going to exclude that group in America, the family that are led by the father, who boycotts soldiers' funerals and blames everyone's deaths on LGBT doings, because that is just they're far too off the scale. I think that Christianity is sort of, I don't think as a whole, as a block, it is friendly to LGBT, because it's the leaders that have the ultimate control and can sway their congregation's views on things. I think individual Christians are. I think individual churches, as in churches in a certain town, because of the leaders and the congregation, can be LGBT friendly. There was a chap called Geraint ap Odderworth, who the Church for Wales, the vicar down here, and he got into serious trouble because in 2005, 2006, when civil partnerships came into being, he was one of the first vicars to celebrate a gay partnership within his church. If you went to his church, his congregation, you received a warm welcome. And I think there were other vicars, other churches that were friendly, and I think they didn't necessarily have to be led by an LGBT structure, like there were various churches in London that are very, very pro-gay. I think they could also be found within the community and ordinary churches. But I also know that there are those vicars who lead congregations who are vehemently against any LGBT goings on, as well as individuals in the church, making it seem to be, using their own opinions to make their churches, or the church as a whole, Christianity as a whole, LGBT friendly. I know there are certain religions within the Christianity group that do not, in any way, shape or form, think that we are valid human beings, or that we are allowed in the church. The Quakers accept us. In fact, they were the first ones to allow ceremonies to happen within the church, their buildings. But then the Jehovah's Witnesses, Church of England, all the other smaller groups, they came across as being very not welcome at all in our church. So with the civil partnership debate, and later on with the marriage debate and any equality things like adoption, like fostering, it became very clear that not only is it individuals within the Christianity group, but churches as a whole, sections as a whole, that are either seeing us as equals or not seeing us as equals. So it's not a sweeping statement, Christianity is friendly or Christianity is not friendly. By the church, I take it you mean Church of England. As a whole, I would say in the early days it wasn't. Again, we're talking 2000, 2005, right up to the marriage. Again, those that had the loudest voice, who were negative, they got a lot of media output, and were so their stories got into the gay media and into the straight media. So when the debate came up about marriage, it was a shame that all the negative stuff seemed to get the media output, and it was a shame that not Justin Welby, but the chap after him, the guy from Pembroke, seemed to come with an agenda of being very pro-gay, but yet when he became the Archbishop, suddenly fell back. And I thought that was a shame. I don't know why his courage failed him. I don't know who persuaded him to rein back his own views and not to be so outspoken, because that showed that the individuals in the church were being not overwhelmed, but were being led by those lower than him, the sort of equivalent of the civil service, I guess, of the church. And that kind of put a negative spin on how the church seemed to be. Also, around the marriage debate, it was a shame that the government, when marriage came into being in, 2-3 years ago, they immediately declared that the Church of England didn't have to take part in these ceremonies. They left it open to all the other churches. The Methodists embraced it. I work in a Methodist organisation with my care home, so personally I know that they are very gay friendly. Not only the organisation I work for, but our vicars and our deacons that come within the building and work with us. And I'm pretty sure if you wanted a blessing or a marriage within their church, they would, or chapel, whatever their building is called, they would allow it. So it seems a shame that the government said immediately, no, Church of England don't have to. Because I also got the impression that the church weren't really asked, or the debate wasn't fully held, which was a shame for those that would have wanted it within their own churches, or allowed their own individual vicars of the parishes their own decision. And it is just a shame that the media seem to show us the negatives. In Ireland, they still haven't got marriage equality, and again, it's the real extremists of the church that are, with their negative opinions, that are getting the media output. With the marriage debate, and the Ireland reminded me that the right wing, like the We Frees in Scotland, I grew up in Scotland on the west coast, so I knew that they were very, very strong religion. You know, no shops open on Sundays. Some of the families I went to stay with, no television, no playing. It was all church or homework for us as teenagers when I stayed with those friends. So when I went up there on holiday and took my wife with me, we were staying on the North Island, which in my day was one of the We Free areas, the Presbyterian areas. And so every time I booked accommodation, I stated very clearly that I was a female going to stay with my female partner in a double bed in a room together, and would that be okay? Both times in the accommodation, the people laughed and said absolutely fine with us, we don't have a problem with it, and they said it's Lewis and Harris that had the problem. So it seemed that the islands and the people that I grew up with, the North Island and North Uist, had changed, whether they became more unreligious, or whether the whole attitude of the religious leaders on the island changed, I don't know. But I do know that Lewis and Harris are still very anti-gay on the church now, the Presbyterian church, and hold the strictures of the Bible to the letter around Sunday trading, around Sunday enjoyments. So I haven't actually stayed up there. I've never actually been to Lewis and Harris, but it would be interesting to see if I'd be allowed into that, into the holiday accommodation. So with all these debates on the BBC News and the Guardian, it led me to believe that whilst I wanted to go back up to the islands, my time up there with my wife might be a bit uncomfortable because the church leaders lead the communities quite strongly up there. But then what I found in reality was completely different. Everybody was referring back up to the Northern Islands, and so what I was hearing on the street with the communities was completely different, including going into schools. I went to visit my old school, I met the old teachers, and the islands were completely welcoming in comparison to what the Presbyterians, the We Frees in the head in Glasgow and Edinburgh were saying during the debates around things like adoption, fostering, all the equality issues that we were having. Well, I've already said that quite often it's the negative side. In Ireland, we are seeing the church's complete negativity, and the politicians who are the Northern Ireland politicians are very religious, especially the Catholic ones as well, but the Protestant ones, very strong with the Bible, and so that is why the equality hasn't quite caught up with the rest of Britain. And it's a shame that the positive stories I don't seem to be picking up. I know they're there from personal experience of talking to people, but they're not the ones that get the media. And I guess it's the media's job to take both sides of the story, but and it's a shame that those within the church that have a bit more authority don't. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they are speaking, and maybe it is the media picking out the negativity around this. How does it make me feel with all these negative stories around the media? Like I said, I'm not religious myself, but it is downheartening to find a group that has a large sway over the British population and current thoughts in society still has a block view on us being not totally equal. About they're one of the go-to groups, and again the media, they would have their sort of expert witnesses and they know who to go to for these comments. So it can be disheartening that those within the hierarchy of the church are not speaking out more positively. I think it's a good thing that we've now got more women in the church, and it's interesting that I've said we've got more women in the church, so maybe working at Methodist Care Home is rubbing off on me. But I think women going into the church will eventually temper that view. I think if they got through, now you've got your first bishop, and they go up through the ranks, I think that might temper it, but that's going to take years. But it is downheartening, even for us atheists, to see that the church is not. It used to lead society, and now it seems to be trailing behind. It's trying to keep society back. And also, that's reminded me about every time we get a disaster, and again, I'm a bit wary about the Americans because they're all about ranting and, pulpit banging and getting money in for their own coffers. So they're very different. But it is a shame that every time there's a major disaster, even in the UK, we have some high-ranking religious leaders who blame earthquakes and disasters on gay people. And I would have thought that, I expect that of American leaders, but I don't really expect that of British church leaders.